Hello, dear grade 6 students. I hope you're doing well. Welcome back to a new lecture. In this lecture, we're going to have a writing workshop, and we're starting with the narrative writing. So by the end of this session, you will be able to identify the different parts of a narrative essay. You will be able to assess a narrative sample and answer questions based on it. You'll be able to brainstorm and organize the key elements of a narrative writing in an outline. And then you will be able to write a complete, coherent, and an organized narrative essay, including all the elements of a narrative writing. Here's the table of contents for this PowerPoint. First, we're going to introduce the narrative essay. What is a narrative essay? Then the organization of every essay, because you used to write short paragraphs. Today, we're going to write more than one paragraph, like 3 to 4 paragraphs. So how are these paragraphs organized and what do I write in each paragraph? We're going to find out. And specifically the organization of the narrative essay, because each essay type has a different organization and different elements. So we're going to get introduced to the elements of the narrative essay. Then we have 4 activities to apply based on what we will explain. After that, we'll have activities 5 and 6, which will be focusing on the time adverbs we use in a narrative essay and the subordinating conjunctions. At the end, you will have a narrative essay as a homework. You will start writing your first draft following all the guidelines. So, starting with what is a narrative essay? From its word, narrative, so I'm narrating a story. It uses descriptive language to tell the beginning, how did my story begin, the middle, the main events in the story, and the end of an event. It has an introduction in which I introduce the story. This introduction engages the reader's interest. I should grab the reader's attention to read my story. Then after that, I should have details about the main event. I should tell what happened and the main actions in this story. At the end, I have a conclusion that describes the outcome. How did this story end? And what did I learn from this story? So clearly we have 3 major parts. I introduce my story, I write all the details and events in the story, and then I write a conclusion. So based on that, we can have 3 to 4 paragraphs. As you can see here, the introduction is the first paragraph of the essay. It introduces the essay. It introduces to the reader what he or she is going to read about. Then the body, number 2. The body of the essay is the bulk of the essay. So the body can be about 2 paragraphs in which I write all the details, all the events that happened in this story. Then the conclusion, I tell the reader, for example, how did my story end and what I learned from this story. So the conclusion is the final paragraph of an essay, and it's typically made of 1 paragraph only. Now, let's get into details to know more about the organization of the narrative essay. As we said, we have the introduction, the first paragraph. We have the body paragraphs, which can be 2, divided into 2, or 1, and the conclusion, which is the last paragraph. Now I'm going to look into each paragraph or each part. What do I write in each part? So in the introduction, I have 3 main parts or 3 main elements. First element is called a hook. This is mainly the first sentence I start my introduction with. So again, I start my essay with the introduction, and I start my introduction with the hook. The hook is the very first sentence. What is the purpose of this hook? Hook is a sentence that grabs the reader's attention. It's an interesting fact or a surprising fact. And after this slide, we'll be looking into details into a sample. So after this interesting fact that I write to grab the reader's attention, I need to introduce what I'm going to talk about. I want to introduce my story in the introduction. So I write some background information. So after the hook, I have the background information. The background tells the history or what happened before this main action that I'm going to present in the story. So before starting to tell the story and what's the major event, what happened first? How did this all start? So this is what I write in the background information. And after the hook and the background information comes the last sentence in my introduction, which is called the thesis statement. Thesis statement is a sentence that tells the reader about the main idea directly of this essay. So if I want to know what this essay is about, I read the last sentence of the introduction, which is the thesis statement, to know the main idea. It prepares the reader for the main action of the story, but for sure it doesn't tell the story or the whole story. So it gives just a hint to the main action or the main idea that I'm going to present. Because it's a story, it gives a hint to the main action or the main event I'm going to talk about in my story. So let me say this again. First paragraph of my essay is called the introduction. As you saw already by now, in my introduction, I'm introducing to the reader my story. I write a sentence called a hook that grabs the reader's attention. Then I write some background information to introduce my story, and then a thesis statement, which is a direct sentence telling the reader what's the main action I'm going to present in my story. Now, after the introduction, I need to start telling my story. So I come to the body paragraphs, which can be 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, okay? So let's make them 2. That's enough for now. So what do I write in the body paragraphs? I will tell the main story, all the events you want to be telling me, what happened in the story, you write them in the body paragraph. So you use a lot of details to bring the story to life, to make me describe, to make you describe what happened, to make me imagine what was happening with you. First, I need to present the situation. The situation describes when, where, and what happens in this story and why the main event is happening step by step. So it often uses time order. It shows me the order of the events. So time order, the time in which these events happened. So you tell me, at my home, I wanted to do this for this reason, blah, blah, blah. So tell me step by step, describe the situation for me, what was going on, where and when. Then you will tell me the rising action. The rising action is the main event or events that lead to the climax. The climax is the main action. The climax is the main event I'm trying to tell you that happened with me. It's the surprise, like the maximum, the top. We always draw this. Let me draw it for you in a story. So as you can see here, here's the start of the story. And then it starts to rise and rise and rise. And these are the rising actions till it reaches the top, the maximum that could happen, which is the point here. This is what I call the climax. After that, the events start to decline and go down, in which I reach the solution here. And this is where my story ends. So this here, this point is called the climax. Okay? The climax, the maximum that could happen in the story, the main action, that's the surprise, okay? So the highest point in my actions. Now before the climax, here is where the story started. I presented the situation. Then what happened before the climax? What happened that made me reach this main event? So what are the rising actions that led to this main event? And then you show me after this event, how did this problem, for example, get resolved, the declining actions, and then how it ended at last, okay? Now, after the body paragraphs presenting all the actions that took place, I need to conclude my essay. So here I start a new paragraph called the conclusion, okay? It tells us three things mainly. First thing, it tells me what happened after this main event. So after the climax, what happened after that? How did the story end? Second, it tells me the lesson that this person learned. So if you're telling me a story, what have you learned from this story? What have you learned from what happened to you? What lesson did you learn? What's the moral of the story? So you need to tell me this. And at the end, how did your life change after what happened? What have you learned and how have your life changed? Okay. So let's do this activity together. Here you have to identify the parts of a narrative essay. You have to match the parts correctly. So we have the hook. Remember, a hook is a sentence in the introduction. It's the first sentence in the introduction that grabs the reader's attention. So read them carefully, take your time and try to solve them on your own. So we can say here the hook is Japan is known as the land of the rising sun. Now, that's an interesting fact. That's the hook, the first sentence. Then I want some background information about the story. So let's see. I learned this and this. What I learned, remember, I write what I learned in the conclusion. All right. Getting off the airplane and walking the streets of Tokyo, Japan was very exciting, but it also felt like home. Okay, but that's not a background information. It's not introducing to me the story. When I was young, I always thought Japan was an exotic country with interesting costumes. I always wanted to go to Japan. This might be a background information telling me that this writer wanted to go to Japan. So maybe the writer will be telling me about his experience visiting Japan. Then the thesis sentence. Okay, getting off the airplane, walking the streets of Tokyo, Japan was very exciting, but it also felt like home. So here we can see clearly the story or what happened with this person after visiting Japan for the first time. Then what's the situation? What's the rising action, the climax, and the conclusion? What's the situation? I was hungry and I wanted something to eat. I found a bakery and I saw a strawberry jam pastry. I didn't know that I was going to learn an important lesson. That's till the end. Okay, so then I learned that many things in Japan look the same as in the UK, but they are truly Japanese and we should appreciate them. Now traveling is more enjoyable. Then I finally bit into the pastry and was shocked to find it was not strawberry. So that's the climax, okay? And the conclusion, what have we learned? I learned that many things in Japan look the same as in the UK, okay? Now, here you have the answer again. The hook, Japan is known as the land of the rising sun. The background, I always thought Japan was an exotic country with interesting costumes. I always wanted to go to Japan. The thesis, eating a pastry, taught me an important lesson. So this is the main idea of this essay, that this person is going to tell us what he or she learned after eating the pastry in Japan. Then what's the situation? Getting off the airplane, walking the streets of Tokyo, Japan was very exciting. So the situation, remember, it tells me when and where. So it describes to me the situation in which this place or in this situation, the action will take place, okay? Or will happen. Then The rising action, I was hungry and I wanted something cheap and delicious. I found a bakery. I saw a strawberry jam pastry like back home. What's the climax? That's the major event, the surprise. I bit into the pastry and was surprised to find it was not strawberry jam. What's the conclusion? I began to like sweet bean past, and I learned that many things in Japan look the same as in the UK, but they are truly Japanese, and we should appreciate them. Now, traveling is more enjoyable. So that's how I organize my ideas, and I make sure I have all the elements of the narrative essay: introduction, body, conclusion. In the introduction, I have hook, background information, and the thesis statement that tells me the main idea or the main story briefly, the situation, how and where and when is the story going to happen or it happened. What are the rising actions that led to the main action, which is the climax or the surprise? And then how did this end? What did I learn? Okay. So here you can see them, the same colors as here, but written in the format of an essay, okay? First paragraph here, or before we start with the first paragraph, I have the title for sure capitalized, My First Japanese Pastry. Now I start with the introduction. First paragraph is the introduction. Okay, let me annotate for you. So here, first paragraph is the introduction. All right, let's read it together. Japan is known as the land of the rising sun. That's the hook, first sentence that's attracting the reader's attention. Now, what's written in red is the background information that's introducing to me what the story is going to be about. Ever since I was a child, I always thought of Japan as an exotic country, filled with many strange and interesting customs. I had always wanted to travel to Japan and experience its old and unique culture. Luckily, it was my first year in university, and I was able to study abroad in Japan. Now, the thesis statement, the sentence at the end of the introduction that tells me the main idea of the whole story. I was so excited, but little did I know that I was about to learn an important lesson because of a simple pastry. So the writer told me the story. I'm going to tell you the lesson I learned because of a simple pastry. This is how the thesis statement shows me the main idea of this story. Now I start with the first body paragraph. So I will write here, body, paragraph 1. Okay. All right. This is body paragraph 1. At first, everything was new and exciting for me. Getting off the airplane from London and walking the streets of Tokyo for the first time was very exciting. So the writer here is showing us the situation first. Remember, describing the place, when did this happen, okay? Seeing all temples, shrines, and some people dressed in kimonos was exciting, and it fit my image of Japan exactly. I thought to myself, my dream has come true. However, after a while, the new buildings, the modern public transportation system, and the modern department stores with all the signs in English made me feel at home. So that's the situation. What he's seeing around, how he's feeling, going to Japan for the first time, landing there. I thought basically Japan is like the UK. So he thought Japan is like UK. But now something shocking will happen, and he will realize that no, Japan isn't really like UK. It has its uniqueness, okay? And now we'll see how. So we go now to body, paragraph 2, which is here. So let me write body, paragraph 2. All right, so now I have in lighter blue the rising actions and then the climax. Walking around, I started to feel hungry. I started looking for something cheap and delicious. I didn't know where I was, so I followed my nose and found a bakery. There were many breads and pastries everywhere. I really felt like I was back home. Suddenly, I spotted a delicious looking strawberry jam pastry. So, these are the rising events that are preparing us to the surprising event, okay, which is the climax, the highest point in this story and the major action that the writer is trying to tell us, okay? After I paid, I bit into the pastry. What's this? I thought. I was surprised to find that it was not filled with strawberry jam. It was filled with sweet bean paste, called anko in Japan. It was such a disappointment. You see now the event that happened. So first, he thought that Japan is like UK, but no, that's not correct. And he told us the story and the main event that made him learn a lesson that Japan is different. So let's see what he learned from this event in the conclusion. So now I have the conclusion here. That's right, conclusion. All right. Although I didn't like sweet bean pastry that day, I have since learned to love it. What I learned was that many things look the same in Japan as in my country, which is London, UK. However, on the side, they are pure Japanese and they should be appreciated for what they are. So we need to like things as they are in that country, even if they look like what they have in UK. Now, traveling is more enjoyable since I learned that lesson. So here, the author showed me how did this end, the story, what he learned, and here also the lesson that he got from this story and how this changed his life. He started to enjoy traveling because he doesn't expect to see same things in other countries, okay? All right, so now I'm going to clear all the drawings and move to the other slide. Now, when writing your own essay, you have to follow the same format as you can see in front of you. I have to think to myself, I have to write an introduction with all these three parts, body, two body paragraphs, the situation, the rising events, and the climax, and then the conclusion, what I learned and how did this change my life. Okay, let's now move to the other slide. All right, so here we have activity number 2. You're going to read the student essay and respond to the questions that are next. Now I will leave this for you. You will read it on your own. Just let me notice you. First paragraph is the introduction. Paragraphs 2 and 3 are the body, where we have the situation, the rising events, and the climax. And last paragraph is the conclusion. And here you have the word count. Total words are 400. So, first question, why is the background information in the introduction important to the story? So why do you think it's important to have background information in the introduction? You refer to the essay that I just presented to you now, here, and tell me why the background information are important. Remember, the background information come in the middle. So after the hook, that's the first sentence, the hook. So here the background information start and before the thesis statement. So all these are the background information. You have to read them and read the story and tell me why are they important. Remember, I read the background information to put the reader in this mood, to introduce the reader to the situation, to the story that I'm going to talk about, okay? All right, second question. How did the writer and Jem become friends? So what's the situation? Where do I look for the situation? In the second paragraph, okay? In the second paragraph. Third question, what happened before the writer's heart was broken? So what happened before the climax? Which means I'm asking you about the rising action. I can look for the rising action in the third body paragraph or third paragraph of the essay. Now, what broke the writer's heart? So this is the climax. The climax is that the major event, the writer's heart got broken, okay? You also find this in the third paragraph. So you refer there to find the climax and answer the question. Question 5, what did the writer learn? So I refer to the conclusion to find out what the writer learned. Was it a positive lesson or a negative lesson? Now, why is this activity important? It will help you apply what we have learned so far and find out the background information, the situation, rising action, climax, and conclusion. In such way, you will be able to understand clearly, to demonstrate your understanding of all the parts of the narrative essay. Then you'll be able to write your own essay. Here we have another activity. You will learn to write a hook. A hook is the shocking statement, the interesting fact, okay, that I write at the very beginning of my essay. It's the very first sentence of my essay, and I write it in the introduction, okay? So the hook is the first sentence of your essay. The purpose of the hook is to get the reader's attention. Now, there are 5 types. You can choose your own and write your own. You can write a shocking statement. You can write an interesting fact. You can write some statistics like percentages. 50% or 90% of the American population do this and this. These are statistics. Or you can ask a question. For sure, all these should be related to our topic. Or you can write a quote, a famous quote. All these can be hooks. You can choose your own and write it as a first sentence to grab the reader's attention. So here we have part A, an introduction to a narrative essay. You have to read it and underline the hook. So take your own time and do it on your own. So let's read it now together. I cannot live without pizza. And then we have the rest. We know for sure first sentence is the hook. So I cannot live without pizza. Oh, this is a shocking statement. You cannot live without pizza, really? So that's a shocking statement. I would like to know more. Why can't you live without pizza? What about pizza? So what type of hook do you think this is used here? The shocking statement. And why do you think a good hook is important? You can see, as we said already, because it grabs the reader's attention. So why is it important? Because it grabs the reader's attention to read my story. Okay, now you have an exercise here. You have the 5 types of hooks. You have examples already written for you to write similar ones, which are your own. So you have to practice writing hooks. First type, a shocking statement. I love pizza more than my family. That's a shocking statement, a hook. Write a similar one, which is your own. Second, an interesting fact. Pizza was first invented in Italy, but modern pizza has changed a lot. That's an interesting fact. Write your own interesting fact as a hook. Then statistic. The average American eats 27 pizzas a year. That's also interesting. These are statistics, percentages, numbers. Find your own. You can use Google to find an interesting statistic. Then you can ask a question. What's your favorite food in the world? Mine is pizza. So all these are hooks that I can write to introduce my narrative. So write your own question. And the fifth is a quote. Einstein once said, pizza is the most perfect food. So you see, here you can practice writing a hook. Now, activity number 4, you're going to read the student essay and respond to the questions that follow. So same as the previous exercise. You're going to underline the hook in this essay. You're going to tell me what type of this hook. We have 5 types. What is the type of this hook? And write a new hook for this essay using a different type than the one used. Okay? So you will answer A and B. Why was the writer home alone? Now, background information. Remember, before telling the story, I tell you the background information, when and where this story is going to be taking place. So, why was the writer home alone? What is some other background information of the story? You go to the introduction to find them after the hook. How 3 problems did the writer have when making curry? So, for sure, before answering these questions, you have to read all the essay. You have to annotate as I did. You have to say, this is the hook, this is the background information, this is the thesis statement. They all make the introduction. Now I start with the body paragraph 1, situation, body paragraph 2, rising action, and then climax, and then conclusion, the lesson learned, and how my life changed. Okay? You do these first, then you answer these questions. So here are the rising actions, the problems that happened with the writer. Then the climax, in which the writer's parents were happy. What was the climax of the story? Why were the writer's parents happy? Because he made some food on his own. You will read and find out. And what did the writer learn? I find this in the conclusion. What did the writer learn? Was it a positive or a negative lesson? Okay, so you really have to solve these exercises. You really have to practice annotating all the elements of a narrative essay to be able to learn what I'm teaching you and then write your own essay. Okay, now we go to activity number 5, time adverbs. So these are the adverbs that show me the time of the action. When was the action taking place? Or the chronological order, the sequence of events, which means which event happened first, which event happened next, which event happened at last. This is what I call the sequence events, okay? So to sequence the events, to put them in their correct order in a narrative essay, because I'm narrating events in a story, I use time adverbs. Like what? I say then, finally, eventually, after that, later, and then, okay? All these are called time adverbs. I use them between my events to tell the reader, finally, this happened. After that, this happened, okay? They usually appear at the beginning of the sentence and followed by a comma. So, our train was running late, point. So I started a new sentence. Finally, comma, it arrived. So it arrived finally after being late, okay? This action happened after this action. So you see how this time adverb is showing me the time in which the train arrived after being late. Let's look at the other example. We got on the train, point, I started a new sentence. Then we realized that we didn't have money for the ticket. When did they realize they do not have money? After going on the train. So because I have the time adverb then, I can know that this happened after this action or after this event, okay? Now, you have to do the following. You have to go to the 2 stories, okay? And find adverbs like finally, then, eventually, and write them on the line. You really have to practice this also because you will be using the time adverbs in your essay. The second thing we're going to use in our essay, and this is the last thing I'm going to explain in this lecture, are the use of subordinating conjunctions. We learned about the subordinating conjunctions before. Remember, they join the clauses, independent and dependent clauses. Now, why are we learning about them again? Because they have a similar role to the time adverbs. They connect the events and help me understand how these events are sequencing in a narrative. So we use subordinating conjunctions to sequence events, for example, before, as soon as, after, when, while, okay? When I'm writing complex sentences, complex, remember, not simple, not compound sentences, complex sentences. So sentences that have two independent clauses and one or more independent clauses. Okay? So again, in complex sentences, the longer sentences in which I have independent clauses and dependent clauses, I join these clauses using subordinating conjunctions. The dependent clauses give extra information about the main clause, which is the independent. We learned this before. So subordinating conjunctions tells when or tell when something happened, after, before, as soon as, okay? They're telling me when this action happened. When a subordinating conjunction comes at the beginning of the sentence, I use a comma. No comma is needed if it comes at the end, okay? So again, if it starts the sentence, I put a comma after the clause. And if it does not start the sentence, if it comes at the end, there is no need. So let's look at these clauses. After our parents left the house, comma. So after at the beginning of the clause, and when I finish this clause, I put the comma. We had a party. Before my brother was born, comma, I was an only child. And here, an only child, okay? Now let's look at another example in which I do not need to put a comma because the subordinating conjunctions aren't coming at the beginning of the sentence. They are here at the middle, okay, between these two clauses. We had a party after our parents left the house. So I switched these clauses. When I switch them and when the subordinating conjunction comes at the middle, there's no need to put a comma, but when it comes at first, I need to put a comma to separate the two clauses. Remember, clause that have one independent clause that have a subject and predicate and a complete thought, and one is a dependent clause that does not have a complete thought or a subject or a predicate, okay? So the second example, I was an only child before my brother was born. So here the subordinating conjunction before came at the middle. So there's no need to write or to add a comma. So here's an exercise for you. You have to join these two clauses using this subordinating conjunction between parentheses. Remember, if you use it at the beginning, you put a comma. If you use it in the middle, there's no need to put a comma. So let's solve our first one together, then I will leave the other two for you. People harvested apples. They cooked and stored them in glass jars. So I can say, after people harvested apples, comma, so after harvesting the apples, comma, they cooked and stored them in glass jars. That's the only way I can write it to be correct. Now you have to do the second and the third. All right. Now here, our lecture comes to an end. After explaining everything to you, it's your turn to write your own essay. Okay, let's call this your first draft, first narrative writing essay. Okay, Here are the guidelines that will help you write. First thing, what are you going to write about? Similar to the essays that I showed you, and similar to the reading lesson presented in lecture 23, Journey to Freedom, the story of Abigail. If you remember, you need to refer back to the story if you want to get ideas to write your own story, and look at the samples, the 3 samples presented in this lecture also to help you. So remember Abigail, we read about her story in which they had to help 2 people, 2 women mainly, who were running from slave catchers, and she showed her inner strength and helped them run away and also helped them get cured from the fever. So you're going to write your own narrative essay about something that you did for the first time in your life. Okay? You have to use many details to make the story come alive for the reader. Present how you showed your inner strength doing this for the first time. Okay? Use an interesting hook for sure. Try to catch a huge fish. That's a joke. Be sure to tell the reader what you learned at the end of your story. So this is in the conclusion. And how has your life changed? For sure, you will write all the elements of the narrative essay. So you refer to that organizer, okay? How should your title be? My first something. You're doing something for the first time. My first trip to blah, blah, blah. My first time I cook something, okay? So use this style to write your title. I want your writer to be my first blah, 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 okay? And remember, I capitalize first letters in my titles, okay? Your essay must be made of 4 paragraphs, the introduction, the body, which is 2 paragraphs, and the conclusion, okay? Go back to the sample that has all the colors in it, showing you all the parts in the essay. Then you can use the narrative essay planner in the next slide before writing your essay. So we write an outline before writing our essay. Count your words to be between 350 and 450 words, okay? And do not forget to write your name. So here is the narrative essay planner. Introduction, write your hook, your background briefly, and your thesis. Remember, I do not write all the details in the planner, in the outline. And then in the body, I will have 2 paragraphs, as you can see here, paragraph 2 and paragraph 3. Write the situation. Situation will be in 1 paragraph. And in paragraph 3, I will present the rising action and the climax. And the 4th paragraph, I write the conclusion, what I learned, and how this changed my life. Okay, here you have another sample. This is the rubric for grading. You have been watching this video. Thank you for watching, and I hope everything was clear. If you have any question, do not hesitate to let me know. Bye and have a nice day.